All right, I want to go over the next assignment, which is our animation one. If I go here and I go there and there and there. I'm actually going to be eliminating the pickup assignment just because of the time we have, and we have another presentation coming up Monday. So we're not going to have this pickup assignment. I will show you how to do a pickup, but it will not be part of it. The points for this will actually just filter back into the walk cycle poses and animation. Okay, so don't worry about that. I'll add those in later. So I'm going to go over the animation. So this is like our last actual assignment for animation stuff. And then after that will just be the demo reel. And if you've had me before, which everyone in here has, those are typically pretty simple. So the animation one, the first thing we have to do is go and find something that we're going to animate. And just like the poses and just like the walk cycle, you don't want to go into it without having some sort of reference. So for these, we want to find a nice, clean animation that's pretty visible, like you can see the entire thing happening. It's not too complex, and then that's what we're going to use as our reference. So typically, these fail videos are like awesome because they're just very quick to the point kind of things. Now these are awesome verse fail, so you get to see like what it's supposed to look like, and then you see someone trying it and then failing at it. So there's that one. That's what it's supposed to look like. And then here's the fail video of that one. Gee, does that. Okay. I would recommend doing, do not do anything that has flips in it. Anything that turns 180 degrees is fine, but when you get into 360 degrees or you get into someone like somersaulting or doing a cartwheel or something like that, it becomes very complex. Oh, man. If you also look up parkour stuff, those are typically good as well. Don't find anyone that's using a skateboard, rollerblades, something like that, where it's just like they're standing there basically and their bodies are just moving. That's kind of like a cheat way. This is the one that I'm going to use here, but this girl falls. You see that she is supposed to be like that, but she walks a little bit, boom, and then falls. Okay, so whatever you find, make sure you can watch it like a million times too, because you will be watching it like a million times. Like even that one you could do where this guy comes and dunks the ball. Like not that one. That one where he comes in second or even the third guy. I don't know what this one does. Or that one. Okay, so find a video. Don't spend hours looking for one. Find one that's pretty short. You can use my reference too. If you're borrowing videos from YouTube, the quickest way is you just put SS before the YouTube, and it takes you to this site where you would then say download in browser, and then you would download the MP4 of that. Okay, we have to have some reference that we can actually go through frame by frame and look at to see what the character is doing. Once you've downloaded it, you'll put it into your folder, and then you'll bring it into After Effects. You don't want to have the whole video there, it's too much. So I dropped it in After Effects. I'm going to pay attention to things like the frames per second. So this is 25 frames per second, so my animation is going to basically be a 25 frame per second animation if I sync it up exactly. So just be aware of that. I'm going to drop this down onto the new composition. I'll turn caps lock off so I can see that. And then I'm going to go find that video. So I believe it was right after this one. Nope. That one. So I'm going to page back a bit until I get to where it starts. Right there. Okay. So I'm going to use Alt left bracket to start my starting point. I'm going to go to the end of the video. Right there. There. Alt right bracket. And now I have basically the video clip. So I bring it back to the beginning of my footage. I shrink my work area, and then I set my composition to trim the comp. So now this composition is just her falling. Okay. Now I'm going to put in here also a new layer. And on the layer, I'm going to go to time and say time. Where is it? No, it should be under time code. They may have moved it. I'm going to go to effects and presets and then type in time code, and it should pull up the time code wherever it's at. Oh, it's under text. So they didn't move it. I just forgot where it was. There we go. Okay. So the time code will actually show you what frame we're on. Right now it's not showing us what frame we're on. So I'm going to set this to frame number. Now it shows what frame we're on. I'm also going to turn off composite on original. And then I'm going to put this in a spot that is not in the way. So something like right there should be good. I just don't want to cover up the action. Okay, so it definitely doesn't cover up the action. Maybe I can even make this a bit bigger. And put that there. Good, okay. You'll notice this starts at frame 0. Maya starts at frame 1, so I may want to either push everything forward a frame. Oops, not the top one though. The top one stays back at 0. There we go. And then I'm going to set my start of my work area right there, so it starts at the same time. And good. Okay, so you'll see this is actually only 2.5 seconds or so, 69 frames. That's all I'm animating is 69 frames. And you'll see that this will still take some time to do. So I'm going to add this to my render queue. I'm going to click on lossless. I'm going to choose from here QuickTime. You will notice if you are on your own computer, After Effects did update some stuff. So typically I would pick from this list H.264. H.264 is not listed as an option. That's just on computers that are updated. The school computers have H.264, so you don't need to worry about it. I'm going to use Media Queue, or Media Encoder, to actually render this out. So what I want to have is basically a reference I could open in QuickTime and go frame by frame to see what this person is doing in each of these so that I can pose my character and animate it. While I'm waiting for Encoder to open up, I'm going to open up my character. So I'm going to go to Character Animation and Andy, ready to pose. There we go. Yes, I know that. Still working, yes. Yes, okay. While this is going, you may want to set up some references so that you know as far as sizing, if they're interacting with stuff, how far apart things are. So if I look at this girl, that rope is basically about the top of her head, maybe like the middle of her head is how far that rope goes. So as I'm animating, I can use it as a reference to say how far they're going to fall down to the ground, okay? So in this case, I'm going to go and just throw in for now a plane about the height of Andy's head and stretch that out. Okay, and it's just a reference point. It's nothing that I need to concern myself with too much at this moment. There we go. I also believe that this kind of flexes too. Yeah, so you can see it's flexing. So I probably want to add some subdivisions in the, in the height direction. There we go. And I'll animate that as well as I'm going. That way it looks like Andy's actually like stepping down into it. All right, Media Encoder is opened. I'm going to delete this top one here because I don't need that. Yes. There we go. I'm going to just pick H.264 from this list. Make sure I put this in an area where I will find it. 2540, character animation, movies, cut video. And then I'm going to say render. So that'll give me my movie. Now I also may have some audio that goes along with this. So that audio specifically doesn't seem like it's very telling as to when things happen. if the character were to, let's say, punch something or shoot a basket, and there's like a ball hitting something or there's a sound effect associated with their action, I may want to use that and bring it into Maya. In this case, I don't need to, but I'm still going to show it in case you do. So I would add this to the render queue here. I would go to lossless. I would turn off video and just leave the audio on. And then just make sure this is set to, that's fine there. Oops, sorry, I forgot to change it up here to a WAV file. There we go. And then under my format options, I think the default should be fine. I'll hit OK. I'll click that. And this will be 40 character. There's a sound folder. So that'll be fail audio. And there we go. So now I should have my movie, and I should have that. So I'm going to right-click and open this up in QuickTime. Because I want to be able to go frame by frame, VLC doesn't allow you to do that. DJV does, so you could do that. You have to figure out what the hotkeys are. I'm also going to make this a bit smaller for this. Okay, so just using my arrow keys, you can see how I can go frame by frame and see exactly what's happening on each of these. Okay. Cool. So now I can go back into Maya. I'm going to right-click. Can I do it through here? No, I can't do it there. I'm going to go up to File and say Import, and then find that audio file. Sound, fail audio, there it is. So you'll see down here, there's my audio. Now remember I said this is 25 frames per second. My animation down here is set to 30, so I have to set this to 25 as well. And then hit save, and now my audio will match up to my video, so that way everything is cool. This is 69 frames. I hit play. Oops. I hear nothing. Let me make sure this is set to real time. Right, so that doesn't really affect mine. So I'm just going to turn my audio off using that, and the audio goes away. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get Andy in position. So I'm going to move Andy up to the tightrope about here. Remember, because it's going to dip down a little bit, so I'm going to leave that there. And that's going to be the start of it. I can always adjust the sizing at the other side. All right, so that's good. And then what I want to do is kind of get this into the pose of what I want it to look like. So this is no different than when you do a walk cycle, no different than when you do your posing. It's literally looking at this first pose and getting Andy into that position. One of the differences that we will do, though, is that instead of breaking this up into lower body, upper body, and head, I'm going to go right to the Andy one and set poses for the entire thing at once. Okay? So when I hit S, I'm setting keys for everything. Also, that's a fun thing. So I'm right-clicking to get to my vertices. Nothing shows up. I'll go here. There we go. So I'm going to grab each of these vertices, and because I want to animate these, I don't want to do this because that doesn't look good. I wonder why that was on a second ago. So I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to add a soft mod. There it is. And what this allows me to do is softly modify this surface. So I can grab that one. I'm actually going to go to the next one and grab that. I'm going to go to the next one and do that. I'm just switching back to the move tool each time and then adding a new one. I don't think Andy's going to come down this far, but just in case, I'll have it. All right, so there's all these soft mod handles right here. Well, I should have been there. What happened to the other ones? not working correctly. Let's find something else to use. Soft mod, yes. 5, yes. No, every time I do it, apparently it's getting rid of it. So I guess I can't do that on those. All right, I will use something else called a cluster, which will work in a very similar way. Deform and cluster right there. So now I'm just grabbing each one of these points and just adding, a cluster to each one of these points. There we go. So that should be plenty wide. Okay, so now each one of these cluster handles I can grab and move down. And eventually I'll hit 3 on this surface, and that should help blend it up a little bit. Okay? All right, so that's good. Put this back up top. There we go. All right. So I'm going to look at this pose that this character is in, and just like before, get them into that pose. So the first thing, just like when we did the walk cycle, just like when you did your posing, I'm looking at the hips and trying to get those in alignment. So I know that this is probably down a bit first, so I'm going to grab this first cluster here and pull that down some, and grab the hips, make sure I'm in object mode, pull the hips down some, and then start to get Andy's foot in position. So the hips are probably also rotated some. You'll see that I bounce around, so I'm not sticking to one specific spot. I'm just kind of moving around these areas. So there's Andy's foot. This should probably be a little bit thinner, so I'm just going to thin this out some. Her foot is, it's pretty flat there. It also looks like she might be leaned up a little bit more like this. Her other foot, she's on the back of it, so I'm going to take this, move it up. I will probably use foot roll. Nope. I'll use toe roll to go like that. Yeah, and she definitely has her hips turned more towards the camera here. And this foot is back on that. Okay. And then for her spine, it looks like she's probably bent over a little bit here, but then her upper body is up like that. So you can see how she's kind of leaning forward a little bit, and then there's a bit of an arc in her back. So that's why I'm rotating this forward and then taking these two and rotating them backwards. Okay. And then I think for this too, using FK is the way to go, so I'm just going to use FK for this. So when your arms go above this plane, you can't just rotate the shoulder. The shoulder doesn't rotate past that. It all comes from here, so I'm going to rotate this up and rotate that up. And then it looks like she has her arm like this, and then maybe like this. And then she's actually like leaning forward a little bit. This doesn't move forward, but I think this does. Yep, there we go. And then I think these collarbones too, I think I can rotate forward. Maybe this I'll just push forward, rotate forward. There we go. And I want to make sure that Andy's looking at the rope because that's what the character is doing, is looking at the rope. Okay, I'm not going to worry too much about facial animations in this pass. I'm just going to worry about the general pose. So that's close enough. All right, so I'm going to set a key on all my stuff. So I just click off basically and then hit S, and it'll set a key on all of my items that I have inside that Andy character set. I don't have these in there, and I should have those in there too, so I'm just going to add those. I'm going to say clusters from all keyable. Just do that. There we go. And then I'll hit S again, and then that'll make sure that everything gets a keyframe set. All right, so that's at frame 1. Whoops, I was at frame 62. How'd that happen? I'm going to cut this, go to frame 1, and then paste that keyframe. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to go forward. And what I'm doing is looking for the next pose in this walk cycle, okay, or whatever they're doing. So it looks like the next pose would be about here. Okay, and I could probably even extend it to maybe that. Okay, so at 13, her other foot is forward. So I'm going to go to frame 13. I'm going to take this back foot. I'm going to scoot it forward like so. I'm going to take the hips and move them forward. Her back foot is off the ground. Her front foot is flat, so I'm going to flatten this one. I'm going to rotate it this way. I'm going to take her hips and rotate it the opposite direction, so probably just make that like that. Take the back foot, no rotation here, but let's go and do some foot roll. Yep, and now the second I did the foot roll, I could see where she's at, this foot, yeah, this foot here can probably come a bit more forward. And then the same thing here. Okay, and then her hips are going to be turned that way. Reverse them a little bit more. Pull this back a little bit more. I'm going to lower the arms a bit. I'm going to rotate Andy's head a bit, so again, she's looking at the rope itself. You'll see that Andy's actually kind of like off to the off center of it, so that needs to be fixed. There we go. And I'm not spending nearly as much time as I typically do because it's just basically about the process of, for me showing it, it's about the process of doing this. I'm going to grab cluster handle there and move this to there. Grab the next one, push that down, grab the other one, push this up. Okay, just like a walk cycle, just like the poses, it's all about just kind of setting up the framework and then going back and tweaking. So now I have this. Okay, now what I would do is then go find the next pose. Chances are the next pose is going to be where she gets into here with her other foot. Oops, and she's about to miss it, so I don't want to go that far. Probably right there. So I'd go to 23. I would put this other foot forward. I would take the hips and rotate them the other way. Move that forward like this. Make sure Andy's still centered on the rope. Make sure this foot is back to being here and back to being there. And it looks like it's even down a little bit, so I'm going to lower it down some. And that foot looks like it might be rotated some from the last one. And again, adjusting what Andy's looking at. This arm is really raised in the air, so that shoulder blade needs to come really far up. Shoulder, I think, needs to come down some because it looks kind of weird. This one can come down a little bit. And eventually what I'm going to do is go back to each of these and just kind of give them some natural motion so it feels like the girl's trying to balance. All right, so that's good. Let me go to my cluster handles and start working out what should be down. So this one should be down to there. This one should be up to there. This one should be back to there. So that should be good enough for now, and I'll set a key. Oops. All right, so now we go here, and then we go there. Okay, so that definitely doesn't look natural. So now what I would do is come back. I would go through in one pass, do all my major keyframes, okay? So after frame 23, which is here, my next major keyframe would probably be right there. Okay, so 29, I get her into that pose. Make sure it looks like her foot is under here so that it makes sense, right? And then my next major keyframe would probably be about there, where she's just hitting the ground. You can't see her legs, so you have to kind of imagine what she's doing. So just do your best, imagine what they're doing. Her hand's on this, the rope is pulled down. This shoulder is down, this shoulder is up, her shoulders are twisted, she's looking way over there. And then I would keep going. Okay, and based on this pose, you can kind of guess what that last pose where her legs should have been. So you can double check and make sure. So now I would get her into this pose. And then that's pretty much it. Okay, so those are her major poses. So then what I would do is go back between them and start to figure out what's happening. So here she's lifting her leg to pass over the other one. So I would go to, let's say, frame 4, I think would be a good one. And I would lift this leg. I would make sure that it doesn't intersect it. I would give her hands. If I watch just her arms moving, you can see how there's some slight motion to her arms. Whereas she's stepping, her arms are like dipping down and then coming back up. So I would dip her arms down here. And I'm going to use actually the shoulders and the collarbones. Okay, and I'm going to be a little bit more obvious with it than they were. There we go. So now already we're giving this thing a bit more life than it had a second ago. So then I would just do the same thing, cut my lines here. So this was 4, this was 13. So then I would see if anything happens between 4 and 13 that I may want to add to this. So I like how her right leg is coming out and is holding there in position, then setting down. So maybe at frame 8, this leg should actually be straight out like this. And these should be flattened, and this should be off. Because that's what that leg's doing now. I'm going to raise Andy up just a little bit, and then set another key. There you go. So now it's already starting to feel like Andy's actually moving a bit more realistic than she was a second ago. And that didn't even touch her arms. Should I do anything with the arms? Yeah, so I think the arms probably could use a little bit more of a dip in there too. Same trick, just grabbing those shoulders, this, and that. And then giving them some rotation. Go. There we go. So now the character feels like they're maybe balancing a bit, especially here because you feel like they kind of went lopsided just a little bit. Okay, so that's how you animate stuff. You start off with your start frame, start off with your end frame, and then you find where those middle areas where it needs more adjustment. Okay, the foot's on the ground here, somewhere in the middle it comes up to its highest point. That's your next keyframe. So then you just keep going through this and start cutting those differences, watching for motion of the legs, watching for motion of the shoulders, the arms, the spine, everything, and then animating your character to it. Things like this whip, where she comes down and she hits this and flings back, that's going to take a lot more keyframes than just these where she's walking nice and smooth. The more drastic the motion is, where we're going from something that's slower to faster, more reactive, you have to add more keyframes. Okay, so here I would probably have a keyframe. Okay, so as she's coming down, there's a keyframe there. Okay, right there would be a keyframe where she's hitting the ground. Probably another keyframe right here as she's like leaning into it. Probably another keyframe right there where her hair is leaned back. And then this whole thing here, she's pretty stable in this area. So I want to make sure that it doesn't transition. Sometimes what happens is if you do a motion and then you pause and you're there for like a couple frames, then you do something else, people forget about that pause and they just go right to the next one. So instead of someone like, in this case, flinging their head back and just kind of pausing there for a minute before she actually moves, you may have other stuff that you want to incorporate. So make sure you have the pauses in there. Okay? And if you don't, literally inside here, those won't come across. Okay? If you don't like something that happened, right-click on the key and delete it, or fix it and override it. Or you may want to cut the keyframe, maybe move it back a frame. Or use your dope sheet to cut it and move it and do whatever. There we go. Cool. So any questions on that specifically? No? All right. Once you're done with it, you'll make a little scene in here. So you may need like a ground plane like I have there. Her wires here look like they're attached to a tree on this side, and we don't see the tree on the other side, but obviously we can assume there's a tree on the other side. So I would add those trees in here just so this isn't floating. Nice lighting, render it out, you have a QuickTime movie, that's it. Okay? Cool.